Imagine yourself in the quiet of evening, somewhere in the hills of Greece, many centuries ago. The air is still warm from the day, but the first coolness of night has begun to drift down from the mountains. You find a place to rest in the open, perhaps on a low hillside overlooking a scattered village. Above you, the sky stretches vast and endless, deepening into a velvet blue. A single star flickers awake, and then another, until the heavens are slowly alive with quiet lights. This sky was the realm of Zeus. For the ancient Greeks, it was not simply an empty dome of air and stars, but the dwelling place of the greatest of their gods, a vast canopy where power, wisdom, and watchfulness resided. They called him Zeus Uranios, Zeus of the heavens, or Zeus Ombrios, Zeus of the rain. To lie beneath the sky was to lie within his presence, to sleep under the gaze of a god who was both father and ruler, both protector and judge. But in this story, we will not speak of Zeus as a king thundering in anger, nor as the subject of epic myths filled with battles and betrayals. Instead, we will move more gently, more slowly, and listen for him in the quiet rhythms of daily life. We will look for him in the rising smoke of a morning offering, in the distant rumble of summer storms, in the shared bread of a household meal, and in the silence of night when thunder rolls far away across the hills. For most people of ancient Greece, Zeus was not a figure encountered in the grandeur of Olympus, but in the simplest of moments. A shepherd raising his eyes to the weather before leading his flock to pasture. A mother pouring out the first drops of wine to him before a family meal. A traveller whispering a prayer at a crossroad shrine. These were not dramatic acts, but small gestures that filled the fabric of everyday existence. To the Greeks, Zeus was not only the god of thunder and lightning, he was also the god of order, of law, of the balance that kept the world whole. His presence was less like a sudden strike of lightning, and more like the steady dome of the sky itself, unmoving, all-encompassing and always there. It is in this steadiness that many found comfort. Imagine now the sound of the evening cicadas softening as night deepens. From a nearby village courtyard, you might smell the faint sweetness of bread baking, or hear the muted chatter of voices preparing for sleep. Someone pours out a small libation of wine, a thin stream dark against the earth. It is a gift for Zeus, a reminder of his guardianship. The act is small, almost unnoticed, but it reflects a truth, that the people lived each day beneath his sky, and they never forgot it. The Greeks told countless stories of Zeus's adventures, but in truth, most people did not live inside those myths. They lived inside the quiet routine of fields and hearths, of markets and temples, where Zeus was less a character in a story and more the ever-present canopy above. He was a god who did not need to be seen, for his presence was felt in the simple fact that the sky existed, that storms rolled across the hills, that rain fell when the crops thirsted for it, and that justice, however imperfectly, still had meaning in human life. For those lying in their beds at night, the connection to Zeus was often an intimate one. They listened to the creak of wooden shutters, the crackle of a low fire, and above it all the sky, sometimes calm, sometimes restless. If thunder rolled in the distance, it was not simply weather. It was a reminder that Zeus was awake, listening, perhaps even speaking in the language of storms. To the weary soul drifting into sleep, this sound was not always fearful. It could be steadying, reassuring, the voice of a god reminding his people that they were not alone in the world. In the slow rhythm of this story, we will walk with the Greeks through their daily life. We will follow them as dawn rises on the mountain altars, where smoke drifts upward into the clear sky. We will sit with them in their households, around their hearths and courtyards, where Zeus was honoured not as a distant monarch, but as a household protector. We will wander with them under the shifting skies, reading the signs of weather and watching the play of light across the hills. We will step into their festivals, where communities gathered not in haste but in long measured ceremonies beneath the open air. And finally, we will rest with them at night, under the same stars and thunderclouds, listening to the silence of a world watched over by Zeus. All of this will unfold slowly, like the drifting of clouds across the heavens. We will not hurry. Each chapter is a step deeper into stillness, each detail a way of settling into the calm. The myths of Zeus will remain in the background, like distant mountains, while in the foreground we pay attention to the small, overlooked details. The kind of details that anchor life, and that bring a sense of peace even thousands of years later. So now, as you listen, Imagine yourself not in a palace or on a battlefield, but simply in the open air of Greece, perhaps lying on a woven mat under a thatched roof, or stretched out beneath the stars themselves. The sounds of life are fading into the hush of night. The fire is low, the sky above is endless, and the great dome of Zeus's heaven stretches above you. Breathe in the air of antiquity. Notice how the air cools against your skin. Listen to the distant sounds of the earth settling into sleep. Feel the nearness of the sky, vast and protective. You are lying, as countless others once did, beneath the gaze of Zeus. And now, in this story, we will begin to drift, slowly and gently, into his world. The night has passed quietly. In the stillness of early morning, the first pale light spreads across the horizon, brushing the hills of Greece with faint shades of silver and rose. The stars linger for a moment, then fade softly, one by one, as the eastern sky begins to glow. A cool breeze stirs, carrying with it the scent of dew settling on grass and stone. For the ancient Greeks, dawn was not merely the start of a new day. It was a sacred transition, a time when the world shifted from darkness to light, from sleep into wakefulness, under the watchful eye of Zeus. If night belonged to rest and to dreams, morning belonged to renewal, to the re-establishing of order, to the reassurance that the sun had risen once again beneath his vast sky. High above, the mountain peaks begin to catch the light. In Thessaly, one might glance toward Mount Olympus, its slopes still shrouded in mist. From a distance, the mountain appears otherworldly, the summit hidden in clouds, unreachable by ordinary men. The Greeks believed this was the dwelling place of the gods, the seat of Zeus himself. And though few would ever venture close, the sight of the peak in morning light was enough. It was a reminder enough of the divine world that stood behind the human one. Yet not all worship was distant. Scattered across the Greek landscape were altars and shrines, some large, some scarcely more than a weathered stone set upright on a hilltop. Many of these were dedicated to Zeus. They stood exposed to the open air, for Zeus was not a god of enclosed temples, but of the sky itself. His sanctuaries welcomed the elements, sun, wind, and cloud, as if the god himself preferred no roof between his worshippers and his heavens. Picture a farmer rising at dawn. He has left his home quietly so as not to wake his family, and now he walks along a narrow path that climbs into the hills above the village. In his hands he carries a small basket, bread baked the night before, and a jug of wine, rough and earthen with a wooden stopper. The air is cool against his skin, the path soft with dust beneath his sandals. He walks slowly, with the rhythm of someone who has made this journey many times. At the hilltop there is a simple stone altar. It is little more than a flat slab of rock set upright by earlier hands, its surface darkened by years of smoke. Around it, the grass bends with dew, and small flowers tilt their heads to the rising sun. The farmer sets down his basket, removes the stopper from the jug, and pours the first measure of wine onto the stone. It trickles down, dark against the pale surface, seeping into the earth below. Then he breaks a piece of bread and leaves it beside the altar, a gift both humble and sufficient. He whispers a few words, perhaps a prayer for rain to soften the soil, perhaps a request for the health of his family, or perhaps only a greeting, a thankfulness for the return of morning. The words are simple, but the gesture is profound. To the farmer, this is not merely a superstition. It is the acknowledgement that his life is woven into a larger order, one sustained by Zeus above. The smoke of past offerings still clings faintly to the altar. It smells of charred grain, of burnt fat, of incense carried long ago. These offerings were never elaborate, often just a handful of barley, a sprig of herbs, a few drops of oil, but they connected the human to the divine. In the rising smoke, the Greeks imagined prayers carried upward, curling toward the sky, dissolving into the domain of Zeus. Elsewhere, on higher peaks, larger sacrifices might be prepared. On Mount Lycaon in Arcadia, or on other sacred heights, communities would gather to honour Zeus Lycaios, Zeus of the wolves and the wilderness. The ceremonies there were older than memory, shrouded in ritual and secrecy. But even at these grand sites, what mattered most was not spectacle, but the act of giving, of acknowledging the god whose sky enveloped all. The rhythm of dawn offerings was slow and steady, mirroring the pace of the natural world. There was no rush. As the sun climbed higher, light spilled over valleys and fields, gilding olive trees and stone walls. Birds called from the hedges. Flocks stirred, bleating softly as shepherds led them to pasture. Everywhere, life began again. But above it all remained the same awareness, that the dome of heaven belonged to Zeus, and that the first light of day revealed his presence once more. Imagine now standing at such an altar, high on a hill, with the morning spreading around you. The wind carries the scent of thyme and rosemary from the rocky slopes. The sound of sheep bells drifts up faintly from the valley. You look to the sky and see clouds forming slowly, their edges glowing gold in the morning light. To the Greek mind, these were not idle clouds. They were the veil of Zeus himself, drifting, shifting, sometimes gathering into storms, sometimes dissolving into calm. When thunder rolled in summer, it was said to be his voice. When lightning split the sky, it was his sign, sharp and commanding. But at dawn, when the day was young and calm, the sky seemed gentler, no less divine, but filled with a sense of peace. To stand beneath it was to stand beneath the vastness of Zeus's order, a quiet reminder that life was both fragile and sustained by powers beyond human control. The farmer who pours his libation does not linger long. He gathers his things, breathes one last prayer, and ascends the path toward his fields. His day will be filled with labour, ploughing, sowing, tending, but he carries with him the memory of that moment at the altar, a reassurance that Zeus has seen, that the offering has been made, that the order of the day has been renewed. So it was, morning after morning, across countless villages and valleys. Zeus was honoured not only in the grand sanctuaries, but in the quiet spaces of dawn, on hilltops where the smoke of offerings mingled with mist, where the first rays of light fell across stone and earth, and where the human heart felt its nearness to the divine. As the morning brightens, you too may imagine yourself at such an altar. The air is cool, the earth damp beneath your feet, the horizon unfolding in endless layers of light. Before you is the sky itself, vast and eternal, stretching far beyond sight. To stand here is to feel, even faintly, the awe and comfort that the Greeks must have felt, the sense that they lived their lives not alone, but always beneath the gaze of Zeus. The sun has now risen higher. The glow of dawn has given way to the softer brightness of morning, and life within the village stirs into motion. In courtyards and small homes, families begin the day with simple tasks, sweeping the ground, tending to animals, preparing bread. Yet even in these most ordinary of routines, Zeus was present. For the Greeks, Zeus was not only the distant ruler of Olympus or the thunderer upon the mountains, he was also Zeus Herkaios, the guardian of the household courtyard, and Zeus Katisios, the protector of stored goods, the unseen keeper of the home's prosperity. His presence extended into the very centre of family life, woven into spaces where children played, meals were prepared, and neighbours gathered. To honour him in the home was to acknowledge that every act, however small, rested under the vastness of his order. Picture a Greek home, not a grand palace, but a modest dwelling of stone and mud brick, arranged around a central courtyard open to the sky. This courtyard is the heart of the household. Here the hearth burns, meals are shared, and prayers are offered. And in one corner of this open space, often near the entrance, stands a small shrine to Zeus. It may be nothing more than a rough column of stone, or perhaps a decorated pillar, with offerings of oil, fruit, or flowers set before it. Each morning as chores begin, the head of the household might pause here. A libation is poured. A few drops of wine, or perhaps water if wine is scarce. A prayer is murmured for health, for safety, for the flourishing of crops and livestock. Children may watch, learning through imitation that the life of the family is never separate from the gaze of the god. These shrines were not grand or imposing. They were humble, quiet presences, just as the acts of worship were simple gestures, daily reminders of a divine order that stretched from the sky down into the intimacy of home. Alongside Zeus's courtyard presence, the Greeks honoured the fire of the hearth, associated with Hestia, goddess of domestic flame. Yet Zeus too was believed to dwell here indirectly, for the hearth was a point of connection between mortal and divine. The fire that burned each day symbolised continuity, the unbroken rhythm of life, and Zeus, as the father of gods and men, was never absent from its warmth. At mealtimes, before anyone ate, the first morsel or the first sip might be set aside for the god. bread dipped in wine, a piece of roasted meat, even a pinch of salt. These were given before mouths were fed. It was not waste, but reverence, a gesture that affirmed the family's trust that they were sheltered beneath Zeus's order. Imagine such a scene, a family gathered around a low table, sitting on woven stools. The mother places a clay dish of lentils before them, steaming gently in the morning air. Before anyone lifts a spoon, the father dips his fingers into the dish and lays a small portion into a separate bowl, which is then carried quietly to the shrine. The children wait silently, watching. Only once the offering has been made does the meal begin. It is a moment of patience, of quiet rhythm, of acknowledging that all nourishment flows first from the gods. Zeus Katesios, guardian of household goods, was sometimes honoured through a curious ritual. Families would keep a special jar, decorated with ribbons, filled with olive oil, fruit, or other staples. This jar was a symbol of the home's wealth and abundance, not wealth in the sense of riches, but the simple provision of food and drink, of enough to sustain. The jar was placed in a safe corner of the house, tended with care, a silent reminder that Zeus's protection extended even into the storage of grain and oil. To us it may seem a small thing, almost quaint, to treat a jar of oil as sacred. But in ancient Greece, survival depended on such stores. A poor harvest, a failed olive crop, or spoiled grain could mean hardship or even starvation. To place these stores under Zeus's guardianship was to entrust the very heart of survival to divine oversight. It was an act of humility, of acknowledging dependence. Even in play, Zeus was present. In the courtyard, children would run, chasing each other, their laughter echoing against stone walls. Sometimes, when games ended, they would mimic their parents, pouring tiny drops of water before the shrine, or bowing clumsily as if in prayer. Such gestures were not forced. They were absorbed from the rhythm of household life. Just as a child today learns to imitate adult tasks, so too did Greek children learn that even in play, life unfolded beneath Zeus's sky. This rhythm of imitation reinforced a sense of belonging. To grow up in a Greek home was to grow up within a world in which the divine was not distant, but woven into the very fabric of daily life, into meals, chores, games, and rest. Households were not isolated. Neighbours often visited one another, carrying baskets of figs, loaves of bread, or small jugs of wine to share. When such gatherings took place, Zeus Xenios, the protector of hospitality, was believed to be present. Every guest was honoured as though they carried the god's own presence. In a quiet courtyard shaded by vines, neighbours might sit together through the heat of midday. Wine would be mixed with water in a large crater, diluted so that it might last through long hours of conversation. Bread would be torn into pieces, olives placed in shallow dishes, cheese cut and shared. And before all else, a few drops of wine would be poured to the earth for Zeus. In this way, even the act of companionship, of simple human gathering, unfolded within the god's gaze. As the day wound toward dusk, the household would again turn to Zeus. A final libation might be poured, this time with prayers for safe rest through the night. The courtyard fire dimmed, the shrine stood in silence, the house settling into quiet. Children fell asleep on mats, their breathing soft and even, while parents whispered a last word of gratitude. To lie down to sleep was not an act of isolation, but of trust. The family lay beneath a roof, but also beneath the wide sky, and in that sky, Zeus was present. The god of order, the god of protection, watched over them as the stars emerged and the silence deepened. What is striking about this household worship of Zeus is its simplicity. There were no grand sacrifices, no golden temples, no crowded rituals with trumpets and processions. Instead, Zeus was honoured in silence, in gestures so small they might almost go unnoticed. A drop of wine, a piece of bread, a jar filled with oil, a whispered word of thanks. These acts reveal something profound, that for the Greeks, Zeus was not only the king of gods, but also the quiet guardian of homes. He was not distant, but intimate, present in the flicker of a courtyard lamp, in the warmth of shared bread, in the patient rhythm of a life lived beneath his sky. And so, within the walls of the home, Zeus was not fearsome but protective. His thunder may have rolled across mountains, but in the household he was a fatherly figure, ensuring stability, watching over children, blessing stores of food and anchoring the fragile rhythm of daily life. Now, as we step back from the household, the day moves forward, the sun climbs higher, casting long shadows across courtyards and rooftops. The hum of activity grows louder. Animals tended, fields worked, markets opening. Yet still, above it all, the sky remains wide and unbroken, and in that sky, Zeus abides. In the next chapter, we will leave the walls of the home and walk outward into the countryside, where the sky itself became a temple, and where clouds, winds and storms revealed the voice of the god. The household has settled into its daily rhythm. Fires burn low in the hearth, children play in the courtyard, and neighbours greet each other in passing. Beyond the walls of the home, however, lies the truest sanctuary of Zeus, the sky itself. Unlike other gods who might be worshipped in temples or caves or groves, Zeus's dwelling was everywhere above, stretching endlessly across valleys, mountains and seas. For the Greeks, the sky was more than atmosphere. It was a living canopy, a veil of divine presence. The blue of noon, the drifting white of clouds, the gathering of storm and the silence of stars, all of these belonged to Zeus. He needed no temple roof. The heavens were his roof. And to step outdoors, to look upward, was to step into his temple. Imagine walking through the countryside on a warm summer morning. The path winds between olive groves, the leaves silver green in the sunlight. Beyond the fields, mountains rise, their slopes lined with dark pines. Above it all, the sky expands, immense and unbroken, a dome of pale blue stretching to every horizon. The Greeks lived always in sight of this dome. For a shepherd tending his flock, it was constant company. For a sailor guiding his boat, it was a compass and a measure of time. For a farmer kneeling to sow seeds, it was a reminder of the rains that must come for the crops to grow. To live under the Greek sky was to live beneath Zeus, to carry on daily tasks with his vast temple always overhead. Unlike temples of stone, the sky could not be closed or darkened. Its light fell on all, rich and poor, free and enslaved, citizen and stranger. In this way, Zeus was felt as the most universal of the gods. No one was beyond his gaze, no one outside his reach. The clouds that drifted across the heavens were imagined as garments of Zeus, cloaks of white and grey with which he clothed himself. When clouds gathered thick and heavy, they said the god was mustering his power. When they parted and dissolved into blue, they said he was at peace. Picture the slow motion of these clouds casting moving shadows across the hillsides. To an ancient farmer, these shadows were not idle play of light, but signs, hints of change, omens of weather, whispers of the god's shifting mood. The farmer might pause in his work, leaning on his hoe, and watch as the sky darkened. Perhaps rain was coming. Perhaps Zeus was stirring. Even today, to stand in a field and watch clouds gather is to feel something larger than oneself. The Greeks gave this sensation a name, Zeus. When thunder rolled, it was said to be Zeus's voice, not always harsh, not always angry, but always commanding. A distant rumble might be a reminder, a quiet reassurance that the god was present. A sudden crack overhead could be warning or judgment or simply a call to attention. Imagine lying in bed at night, shutters closed against the wind. Outside, the sky shudders with sound. The wooden beams of the roof creak. A dog barks nervously, and in the silence after the thunder fades, a child whispers a prayer. The family need not see Zeus. They hear him, and in hearing him, they know they are not forgotten. In the countryside, shepherds too listened. On lonely hillsides, they learned to distinguish the voices of thunder, the long, rolling growl of storms far away, the sudden crack of one close at hand. Each sound carried its own weight, its own meaning, like different tones in a language. To them, the sky was a speaking god. Most of all, Zeus was honoured as the bringer of rain. Without rain, no grain could grow, no olive tree could bear fruit, no vineyard could flourish. The rains of Greece were irregular, often arriving in sudden bursts, then vanishing for weeks. Each drop was precious, each storm a gift. Picture a dry summer valley, the earth cracked and pale. Dust rises with every step and the crops wither. Then, at last, the clouds gather. The air thickens, heavy with the smell of moisture. A wind rushes through the olive groves, bending branches, and then rain. Heavy silver streaks of water falling onto parched soil, sinking deep, reviving what had nearly died. The Greeks called Zeus Ombrios, the Zeus of rain. Farmers lifted their faces to the sky, arms outstretched, welcoming his gift. Children danced in puddles, their laughter mixing with the drumming of rain, and in each drop they felt the god's presence. Rain was not only necessity, it was sacred blessing. To pray for rain was to pray for life itself, and when it came, the offering was answered. For sailors, Zeus was also present in the winds. They felt his power not only in thunder, but in the unseen currents that filled their sails. A favourable breeze was his kindness, carrying ships safely across the Aegean. A sudden gale was his anger, scattering vessels and testing the courage of crews. Picture a small wooden boat, rocking on the waves, its sail snapping in the wind. The horizon is wide, the sea vast, but above it all the same dome of sky arches, linking ship to shore, sailor to farmer, valley to mountain. All lived under the same roof, all subject to the same winds, rains and storms. The sky made the scattered islands of Greece into a single world, unified under Zeus. When the day ended and the sun slipped below the horizon, the temple of Zeus changed but did not vanish. The stars emerged, scattered like grains of light across the dome of heaven. For the Greeks, these constellations were not random. They were stories, myths preserved in luminous form, heroes, creatures, gods. Yet behind them all, the sky remained Zeus's dwelling. Imagine lying on a hillside at night, far from the smoke of villages. The air is cool, the crickets sing, and above stretches a map of light. Orion strides across the heavens, the Pleiades cluster tightly, the great curve of the Milky Way arcs from horizon to horizon. These stars are steady companions, marking seasons, guiding travellers, comforting the restless. To the Greeks, they were also reminders that the order of the cosmos was Zeus's gift, that even in the silence of night his presence endured. Beneath those stars, sleep came easily. In a world of inequalities, masters and slaves, rich and poor, men and women, the sky was a great equalizer. All breathed its air, all lived beneath its dome, all depended on its rains. The gaze of Zeus fell on every roof and every path, impartial and unrelenting. This universality was one reason Zeus inspired reverence. Other gods might belong to specific cities, temples, or cults, but Zeus was everywhere. A traveller crossing strange lands could look up and know he was still under the same sky, still within Zeus's temple. This comforted, reassured, and reminded all that life, no matter how uncertain, rested upon something eternal. And so the Greeks lived not only in their homes, but also beneath their sky temple, with Zeus ever near. His signs were not rare, they were constant. The play of light on clouds, the growl of thunder, the rush of rain, the glitter of stars. These were his rituals, his sacraments, his gifts. To walk into the fields, to set sail upon the waters, to lie down beneath the stars, each was an act of entering his sanctuary. He required no walls, no roof, no priest to mediate. The sky itself was enough. As the day moves forward, we leave the countryside with its vast horizons and turn to gatherings where Zeus was honoured not in solitude but in community. Festivals and sacred games where thousands met beneath his gaze. The life of the household is steady, the presence of Zeus felt in the hearth and courtyard. Beyond the fields and villages, his vast temple, the sky, arches over all. Yet there were moments when the people of Greece gathered not in solitude, nor only within their families, but as whole communities. At such times, Zeus was honoured in ways that were slow, deliberate, and profoundly human. Festivals, pilgrimages, and sacred games were woven into the rhythm of the year. They were not constant, but when they arrived, they carried the weight of centuries of tradition. These gatherings reminded people that they were part of something larger, not only the household, not only the village, but the wide world under Zeus's gaze. Imagine walking along a dusty road in summer. The sun warms your shoulders, and the cicadas sing ceaselessly in the trees. You're not alone. Travellers pass by in small groups, men leading donkeys, women carrying baskets, children skipping alongside. Each group walks with quiet purpose, carrying food, oil, or small gifts for the festival ahead. Pilgrimages were as important as the destination. The journey itself was a ritual, a time of reflection, a chance to step out of daily labour and into a slower rhythm. At roadside shrines, travellers paused to pour a drop of water, to leave a fig or a handful of grain, whispering a prayer before continuing onward. The dust clings to their sandals, but their hearts are light with expectation. Step by step they move toward Olympia, toward Nemea, toward Dodona, or toward any place where Zeus was honoured. The roads were not paved or easy, but they carried people together, neighbours and strangers walking side by side, bound by the same devotion. Of all the festivals, the Olympic Games were the most famous, yet they began not as sport but as ritual. Imagine approaching Olympia in the days before the festival. The valley of the Alpheus River lies ahead, shaded by groves of olive and plane trees. The air is thick with the sound of flowing water, the scent of pine, the distant murmur of arriving crowds. Scattered across the fields are tents and makeshift shelters. Families set down their bundles, merchants prepare wares, cooks light small fires. The atmosphere is not hurried. People greet one another, share food and trade stories. At the heart of it all stands the great altar of Zeus, where smoke will soon rise into the open sky. For the Greeks, this was more than an event of competition. It was a gathering of peace. Armies laid down their arms, roads were cleared of conflict, and for a brief time the wide world of Greece, so often divided by war, remembered its shared devotion. To stand at Olympia was to feel a rare stillness, a sense of unity under the god of order. On the morning of the festival, the first act is sacrifice. Not the noisy spectacle one might imagine, but a solemn offering, carried out with calm and gravity. A bull, garlanded with ribbons, is led to the altar. The priest speaks words of invocation, the crowd falls silent, and smoke begins to curl into the sky. The smell of burning fattened grain drifts across the gathering. People lift their faces, watching the smoke rise, believing their prayers ride upward with it. To them, the altar was not simply a pile of stone, it was a bridge, a threshold where the human and divine touched. Children tug at their parents' garments, eyes wide at the sight of ritual. Yet even in their wonder, they learn that all this, food, strength, life itself, comes from Zeus, and all must be given back in gratitude. After the sacrifices came meals shared by hundreds. Picture rows of people seated on the ground, each with a simple dish in hand. Bread is torn, olives are passed, wine diluted with water fills clay cups. There is laughter here, but not the laughter of frenzy, rather the low murmur of neighbours and strangers alike, comforted by the abundance and the nearness of the god. The act of eating together under Zeus's sky was itself sacred. It was a reminder that human life was not sustained alone, but in community. One household's ritual offerings had expanded outward into a whole gathering, all fed by the same earth, all blessed by the same heavens. In time, the games themselves began. But even here, the atmosphere was slower, more deliberate than one might expect. Before races and contests of strength, athletes walked to the altar of Zeus, laying down small offerings. Oil was poured, prayers whispered, and silence observed. Only then did the contest commence. Picture the stadium at Olympia. Not a roaring arena, but an open field lined with earthen embankments where spectators sat in the sun. Athletes, their bodies gleaming with olive oil, ran barefoot across packed earth. The crowd watched, not with frenzy, but with focused quiet. Each contest was less about victory and more about honour, about aligning human effort with divine order. When victors were crowned, they received not gold, but a wreath of wild olive leaves cut from the sacred grove of Zeus. Simple, enduring, a symbol that strength was recognised not by wealth, but by humility. The wreath would wither in days, but the honour endured a lifetime. As the day waned, fires were lit across the camp, the air filled with the smell of roasted meat, the low hum of song, the crackle of firewood. Groups gathered in circles, sharing food and stories, their faces glowing in the firelight. Above them, the sky stretched vast and starlit, the same sky that arched over shepherds, farmers and sailors across Greece. To sit here, among hundreds, was to feel the magnitude of Zeus's temple. Each star seemed like a lantern in his house, each flicker of flame a reflection of his eternal watchfulness. People drifted to sleep beside their fires, wrapped in cloaks, the murmurs fading into stillness. The valley was filled with humanity, yet beneath the sky, all seemed hushed, all seemed sheltered. Olympia was not the only place. At Dodona, pilgrims travelled to hear the voice of Zeus in the rustling of sacred oak leaves. Imagine sitting quietly in a grove, waiting for wind to stir the branches, for the whisper of the god to move among the trees. There were no trumpets here, no stadiums, only the sound of leaves, bird song, and the slow breathing of the earth. At Nemea, at Isthmia, at countless lesser sites, Zeus was honoured in similar ways. Always the sky above, always the slow rhythm of offerings, always the sense that human life unfolded not in chaos, but in an order anchored by his presence. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about these festivals was their peace. Wars raged constantly across Greece, city against city, rival against rival. Yet at sacred times truces were declared, and enemies walked the same roads together. The presence of Zeus commanded this peace, if only for a while. Imagine two men who might face each other on a battlefield in another season. Here they sit side by side, eating bread from the same loaf, watching the same contests, listening to the same prayers. For a few days the vast sky above seems to hold them both as brothers, not enemies. This, too, was Zeus's gift. Festivals and sacred gatherings were not moments of escape from ordinary life, but amplifications of it. The small libations poured at household shrines became great libations poured at altars. The bread shared in families became bread shared among hundreds. The prayers whispered in solitude became prayers voiced by crowds. And yet through it all the same steady rhythm endured, the rhythm of offerings, of gratitude, of humility beneath Zeus's sky. As night deepened over Olympia, over Dodona, over every sacred place, the fires dimmed and silence returned. Travellers lay down to sleep on the ground, listening to the soft sounds of crickets, the rustle of leaves, the distant flow of rivers. Above them stretched the same stars that had guided their ancestors, the same heavens their children would look upon. And in that vastness, they felt the presence of Zeus, not as thunderer, not as conqueror, but as the guardian of order, the father of all, the silent watcher beneath whose sky they rested. The festival has ended. Fires burn low, pilgrims drift into silence, and villages once again settle into their nightly rhythms. The sky above remains the same, vast, patient, unbroken. For the Greeks, night was not absence, but a different kind of presence, a time when Zeus's dominion was felt in subtler ways, in the hush of stars, in the roll of distant thunder, in the mystery of dreams. As dusk deepens, the voices of the day fall away. Farmers return from fields, shepherds guide their flocks to pens, and mothers hush their children. The sound of cicadas grows faint, replaced by the steady chirp of crickets. Smoke from hearth fires drifts upward, carrying with it the faint scent of charred wood and bread baked in clay ovens. Above, the colours of twilight soften, lavender at the horizon, indigo deepening overhead. Soon the first stars awaken. For those who lived long ago, this was no ordinary sight. It was the slow unveiling of the divine canopy, the reappearance of Zeus's celestial temple. The people of Greece lived without lamps of glass or streets of fire. Night was not driven away by light. It was embraced, entered fully, its silence filling the air like a second skin. And within that silence Zeus was near, not in thunderous command, but in steady guardianship. On some nights, the silence was broken by thunder. Not the violence of a storm overhead, but the distant murmur of clouds beyond the mountains. To lie in bed and hear this low roll was to remember Zeus's voice, deep, watchful, reassuring. Imagine a child in a small Greek home, curled beneath a woven blanket. The walls are thin, the shutters wooden, and through the gaps in the roof beams a glimpse of stars can be seen. The child stirs at the sound of thunder, uneasy at first, but then a parent whispers, "It is only Zeus watching." The words are soft, but they carry comfort. The child drifts back to sleep, held by the sound of the god's faraway voice. Thunder could frighten, but it could also soothe. Its rhythm was slow, measured, rolling through the valleys like a heartbeat of the sky. Many must have fallen asleep to it, lulled by the reminder that the heavens were alive and that life itself unfolded under divine order. The Greeks believed that Zeus, like other gods, could send dreams. To sleep was not simply to rest, but to enter another realm, where gods might speak through symbols and visions. In sanctuaries like that of Asclepius, People sought healing dreams. In homes they sought guidance, warnings, or blessings. Picture a weary farmer lying down after a day of toil. He closes his eyes beneath the endless canopy of stars, his body heavy, his breath slow. In his dream, perhaps he sees a fertile field ripe with grain, or perhaps he sees a storm breaking open the skies. When he wakes, he interprets these visions not as random, but as gifts, messages carried through sleep, signs from Zeus that the world was ordered, that tomorrow had meaning. For the listener too, drifting towards sleep, this ancient sense of dreams as divine messages carries a quiet reassurance that even in unconsciousness, one is not forgotten, but guided. Night revealed what day concealed. The stars. The Greeks gave them names, wove them into stories, traced the shapes of heroes and beasts. But beyond the myths, the stars were constant companions, steady lights in the silence. To lie outside on a summer night was to see thousands of them, faint, shimmering, each one a lantern in the vast house of Zeus. They marked time, they guided sailors, they reassured the lonely. The constellations shifted slowly across the seasons, reminding people that life itself was a cycle, that order prevailed, that the god of the heavens ruled not through chaos, but through rhythm. Imagine the Milky Way stretching across the Greek sky, a river of light flowing endlessly from horizon to horizon. To ancient eyes, it was the very breath of the cosmos, a sign of eternal continuity. To sleep beneath it was to rest beneath Zeus's eternal watch. At night, the divisions of day fell away. In darkness, a slave and a master lay equally beneath the stars. A general and a shepherd looked upward at the same constellations. The wealthy slept in tiled houses, the poor on mats in courtyards, but above them all, the same sky extended without distinction. This universality was perhaps Zeus's greatest gift. The sky belonged to no one, and to everyone. It enfolded all in its silent embrace, reminding each soul that they were part of something vast and ordered, beyond human quarrel and strife. In this way, the night sky itself was a teacher, a slow lesson in humility and belonging. For to look upward was to feel small, yet also to feel safe, enclosed within the dome of eternity. As the final embers of hearths fade, villages grow still, dogs curl at thresholds, hens settle in coops, fields lie quiet under dew. The roads are empty, the marketplace is silent. All of life has entered rest. A hush lies across the land, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through trees, the distant murmur of a stream, or the faint growl of thunder far away. Each sound folds into the silence, becoming part of its rhythm. For the Greeks, this closing of the day was sacred. It was not an ending, but a preparation, a passage into the realm of dreams, into the messages of gods, into the soft embrace of sleep. And in that passage Zeus was present, the guardian of order, the watchful father who ensured that the rhythm of day and night would never falter. Zeus's greatest gift was not thunder, nor lightning, nor even rain, but the reassurance of continuity. The sun would rise, the rains would fall, the stars would return, the seasons would turn. Beneath his sky, life unfolded in cycles both fragile and eternal. To the Greeks, this was comfort. They did not need to see him, nor to imagine his face. It was enough to feel his presence in the endless dome above, in the roll of thunder, in the glimmer of starlight, in the slow rhythm of day yielding to night. And so, each evening, as they lay down to sleep, they did so with the knowledge that they rested not alone, but under his gaze. The world might be uncertain, but the sky was steady. The god was steady. Order was steady. Now, as we return from ancient Greece to the present moment, imagine yourself lying beneath that same sky. The centuries have passed, but the heavens are unchanged. The stars you see tonight are the same stars the Greeks once watched, the same constellations that guided their journeys, the same dome that reassured their hearts. Close your eyes and hear the hush of the night. Feel the weight of sleep pressing gently upon you. Imagine thunder rolling far away, not as fear, but as a lullaby, the god's voice reminding you of his presence. Picture the stars above you, each one a lantern in the house of Zeus, each one a light in the vast silence. You are safe beneath this sky, as they once were. You are part of its rhythm, its continuity, its eternal order. Let the breath slow, let the body rest, let the mind drift into the realm of dreams. The day has ended, night has come, Zeus watches still. The journey is ending now. We have walked with the Greeks through their homes and courtyards, through the fields and mountains, through the roads that led to festivals, and into the silence of night. Each step has carried us deeper into the world of Zeus, not as the thunderous ruler of myth, but as a steady presence, woven quietly into every part of life. In the household he was honoured with a drop of wine, a piece of bread, a whispered prayer. Nothing elaborate, nothing grand, just the daily rhythm of gratitude, repeated again and again until it became as natural as breathing. In the countryside, his presence was felt in the dome of the sky. The gathering of clouds, the roll of thunder, the blessing of rain, these were not only weather, but signs of order, of continuity, of a god whose temple was the heavens themselves. In festivals, his name drew thousands together. Neighbours and strangers, allies and enemies, all walked the same roads to share bread, to watch contests, to sit beneath the stars in peace. For a brief time, the divisions of the human world faded, and the vastness of Zeus's sky reminded them of their shared place within it. And in the quiet of night, when the stars emerged, his presence lingered still. Each constellation a story, each thunder roll a reminder, each dream a whisper. Beneath the dome of heaven, all lay equal, all lay sheltered, all lay remembered. Perhaps the greatest gift of Zeus was not the sudden flash of lightning or the booming voice of thunder, but the steady reassurance that the world had order, that the sun would rise, the rains would fall, the seasons would turn, and the stars would always return. To the Greeks, this continuity was sacred. It meant that no matter how fragile life seemed, how uncertain the harvest, how distant the journey, how restless the dream, there was always something steady above, something eternal. The sky itself bore witness to this truth, and now, as you listen, that same sky stretches above you. Centuries have passed, empires risen and fallen, stories told and forgotten, yet the stars remain. The thunder still rolls, the rains still fall, the winds still carry ships across the seas. The sky you see tonight is the same sky that sheltered farmers in their fields, that guided sailors across the Aegean, that listened to whispered prayers in village courtyards. The same dome that was once called Zeus still extends above you, unchanging, eternal, so let yourself rest beneath it now. Imagine the vast dome stretching over you, stars like lanterns in the house of Zeus, each one steady, each one watching. Imagine the distant roll of thunder, not as warning, but as a lullaby, deep and slow, a voice reminding you of order and continuity. Breathe deeply. Feel the rhythm of your body, the slow rise and fall of breath, echoing the rhythm of day and night, of seasons turning, of stars moving across the heavens. You are part of that rhythm. You always have been. The Greeks ended their days not in fear, but in trust, that as they lay down, Zeus watched, and as they woke, his sky was still above them. You, too, lie now beneath that same eternal canopy. Let the thought bring comfort. Let it soften the mind, loosen the body, prepare the heart for sleep. The day has ended, the fires have dimmed, the voices of the world have fallen silent. Only the sky remains, steady, eternal, protective. Close your eyes. Let the stars keep watch. Let the thunder roll softly in the distance. Let the dreams come, slow and gentle, carrying you deeper into rest. You're safe beneath the sky of Zeus. Sleep now and know that the order of the world continues, that the heavens are steady, and that you are part of their eternal peace.